Is East Harlem Community Radio coming to you from the James Weldon Johnson houses. The workshop is the Wisdom Table, consisting of dynamic seniors who are about to launch their own radio show, talk show. In the meantime, Brother Leroy, that's me, is the lead person, but always joined by the seniors as we do an interview in progress. This program does not reflect the views, attitudes, whims, deeds, or any other proclivities of the management of the James Weldon Johnson Community Center, nor that of the administration. However, the program does reflect the research done by the participants in the program who are live and live in color, in studio, and by phone interview. By phone interview today is a young man, Charles Woods. He is an expert on movies, black movies. Now, everybody listening will say, I'm an expert on black movies. I go to movie theater every day, every week rather. And when I grew up, I was going to the theater. I got DVDs, I got VHR, etc., etc. However, this brother is an historian in terms of black themed movies and movies with black actors and actresses in them. Why is that important? We'll discuss that as we get into the program. We have a psychiatrist, psychologist, who hasn't arrived here yet, and she can give some insight into the impact of movies and moving images on the brain of anyone, but in particular black people. So, the reason we have invited Charles Woods to be with us today is that there are lots and lots of black themed movies, reality shows, cartoons, superheroes that is coming out now. And it's not an interview based on, hey, this actor, isn't he getting a lot of money now, and that sort of stuff. This goes into the images, the imagery, the portrayal of black people, men and women, in theater. So, Brother Charles, give us a background, your background, a short and brief background as to how you came about to study this area and why is it important to our general public, especially senior citizens who in many cases are taking care of their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The floor is yours.
Brother Leroy, thanks for inviting me to this discussion. Just to make it quick, I'm an old-timer too. I'm a senior. And growing up in the 50s, I watched a lot of TV because TV was a surrogate person in my home. I didn't have a brother or sister. There was mom there. I didn't have a dad around. But the thing is, television was very important to me. And so I watched a lot of TV, and I grew up on Westerns. Westerns was very big during the 50s. And I loved Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy, all these heroes. And as a kid, and what the psychiatrist can address when the person gets there is, as a kid, you don't have what is called adult discount. Adult discount meaning you don't know right from wrong. You see things and you accept it because you see it on TV. You accept it as the way of the world. And so I'm seeing all these white characters, and I wanted to be white. That's what the message was, that I wanted to be white. And I used to go out and collect movie stills of my Western heroes. And I didn't know from watching all these Westerns that there was a rich history where black men and women were also Western heroes. But that wasn't the history I was getting in cinema or on television. And I would collect all these stills of my heroes, Lash LaRue, Durango Kid. And I'm going through the folders of the different places I would go for these stills, and I would see pictures of black actors from movies that were made during the 40s, and they were called race movies. I never heard of these things. There were people the stars were Ralph Cooper, Edna Mae Harris, people like this. And I said, who are these people? And so that started me to be very curious, and I said, let me look into this. And that's where it started, where I started researching the history of blacks in cinema, and there was very little written on the subject. I think the only person who had a book out was a person named Peter Noble, Blacks in Film. And from that time on, I've been researching and researching. Years ago, I started, I formed a group called the Black Preservation Committee, where we started preserving films with blacks in it. And this is what we went around promoting, the images of blacks and digging up this history so that we could bring it to the attention of the public.
I'm sorry, Charles, what was the name of that group?
The Black Films Preservation Committee.
Okay, go ahead.
And we would go and we would take it to different organizations. I worked with a group in Harlem. We started the film showings in Harlem, which was very popular. And I would also, I got into being a consultant on different shows. I worked with the Gene Davis group, and we did a lot of special programming on the Black family, Sarah Vaughan, Abby Lincoln, jazz artists, things like that. And I also was very instrumental. I had a shop years ago called the 43rd Chamber. And with that shop, we helped to keep the image of black cinema alive, and we also were very instrumental in promoting Asian cinema, the Kung Fu movement, which was very popular also during the time of what was called during the 70s Blaxploitation era. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Right now, what I'm doing, I have a YouTube thing I do with Real Black, and I'm very excited about that. We discuss films, and I give my what we call mini lessons, where I break down the different themes of blacks in cinema.
Very good. So talk about the imagery of blacks over the years. As you got into showcasing the talent of blacks in film, you began to take note of the imagery that was dominant from one period of time to another. So go through that for us, please.
The history has been that, I always start with 1915, The Birth of a Nation. That film, despite the efforts of a young NAACP and other progressive groups, white allies, in an attempt to keep that film from being shown, it was shown, and it was viewed as one of the greatest films of all time. But the imagery in there, the message of anti-black stereotypes in that film, it was a horrendous affront to black people. And that film set in motion, from a narrative perspective, cinematically, all of the things that would follow in films after that, where you would have the classic image of obsequious mammies, skinning and grinning buffoons, black men as emasculated darkies. This was the thing that was started with Birth of a Nation, and it continued on through the 30s and 40s. And some people, they labeled a number of these characters as mammies, tragic mulattoes, and different happy darkies on slave plantations. But I just narrow it down to three basic images that we get, or we have had in cinema. We started out as savages, where you see the wild natives and African jungle films like the Tarzan film. Servants where you have the different people coming on, the black people coming on and serving the coffee, the tea, and they're happy to serve you, the Uncle Bens, the Uncle Toms. And then you had what I call the specialty act, where you had, if you had blacks at all, it was during the 40s, 30s, late 30s and 40s, where you had the blacks as musical artists. Um, so you had the Nicholas Brothers, the Lena Horns, and whatnot. So basically, you had three images: savages, servants, and specialty acts. This was the definitive image of blacks in motion pictures. 1949, uh, really the break started when there was an attempt to rally blacks around the World War II effort. You had an attempt to show blacks more progressively. So you had films like Sahara in 43 with Rex Ingram. You had in Midtown Light.
No, Charles, I'm sorry. You kind of broke up.
Okay.
Start just with that World War II piece. Go for that.
Yeah, with World War II, you had an attempt by the industry to show blacks more progressively in films, to rally blacks to be a part of the war effort. You know,
right?
It was hypocritical for America to have to maintain democracy and fight the Nazi attempt to change the world. And the hypocrisy was that right here in America, black people were never treated equally. So they had this attempt, you know, that the four freedoms was the big slogan of the time. One of the big changes that they wanted to make was through film to show that in America everything was great. So in the war films, this is where you had the diverse army unit. You'd have a black man. You'd have some guy from Brooklyn, the Irish, and things like that. This was an attempt to show the world that America was one big melting pot. It was all a big lie, but it was propaganda. 1949, you had what was called the problem film cycle. And this is where you got films like Home of the Brave, Pinky, and Lost Boundaries, where there was an attempt to show racial tolerance. And then in 1950, this is the start where you had a man by the name of Sidney Poitier had his first film, No Way Out. He played a doctor. It was a wonderful film. And from that point on, things got better image-wise for blacks. But the message in the movies from the 50s to the 60s was one of integrationists. Sidney Poitier became the ebony saint, as they would call him. The ebony saint. He was someone who showed that he was the good black man. He was the noble black man. But he was the exceptional black man whom people would love. And into the 60s, you had a more militant era that came about. And Sidney, he was still the man. From 1950 to 1967, Sidney was the man. But things progressively were changing where blacks as an audience, they wanted to see Sidney in more realistic situations where he wasn't just some token black. He wasn't the only black. And he was dealing with issues that most black folk were facing in the real world. And so after 67, which was the biggest year for Sidney Poitier, we had three big hits, In the Heat of the Night, To Serve with Love, and there was another film I can't think of right now, but the thing is
that Guess Who Coming to Dinner? Was that it?
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, exactly. He was top box office, but the thing is that image of Sydney was no longer popular with a more militant black audience, Brother Leroy. So what happened is you had Jim Brown, and Jim Brown, his characters, they would give you an image of a sexual black man. Sidney was devoid of sex. He was sexually muted. But Jim Brown gave you the sexual black man, the strong, defiant black man. And then going into the 70s with 1971, we had Sweetback's Badass Song. You had blaxploitation start. And blaxploitation lasted for about maybe a good solid 4 years, from 71 to 75. And as a consequence, to change from blaxploitation, there was a new thing that came about, a new term where the black image became the crossover. The crossover, where you had blacks who became more or less sidekicks. And there was an attempt to show what I call salt and pepper relationships, where you would have a white man and a black man working together. They would do something, but the white man would always be the leader, and the black man would be the sidekick. And after the crossover period, not until 1986 did you have a new type of imagery come on, where we would have Spike Lee with She's Gotta Have It, started a cycle of films that were considered black authorship, where you had blacks as directors and their hand behind the scenes involved in the imagery. So that came on. And then in the 80s, we had the blacks as boys in the hood, that image. So moving right along, you would have stars like Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy became the big hit in the 80s. Before him, Richard Pryor. Just to put it in a nutshell, what happens is the images of blacks has always been what I call a very circumscribed image, where you always have blacks basically shown as the magic Negroes, sidekicks, or exceptional blacks. There used to be a term that was very popular for these kind of blacks. They were called noble savages. But people don't like to use the term noble savage, so what became more popular is sort of the magic Negro trope. But basically what you have is there was always an attempt in America, from an American perspective, to show that blacks and whites get along with each other, this illusion of inclusion. That's the message. Cinema, in a nutshell, is about satisfying the status quo, perpetuating the status quo, and motion pictures is not really about representation, but representation of who we are. We don't see who we really are in motion pictures as much as we see an imitative image, an image of how they want to project us that is safe and reassuring.
You're going to say the basic,
Noble savage.
representation.
Yeah, represent.
Representation.
Yeah, well,
Okay, go through that. First of all, define what you mean by stereotype and come forward from there. I mean, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Status quo. Status quo.
right. The way I see cinema from my perspective, from studying it on a historical level, Brother Leroy, is that basically what we get in motion pictures is black men and women who are projected as being the popular blacks are updated stereotypes. We started the most popular form of entertainment in America. The first was minstrelsy, and in many ways we have what is called a neo-minstrelsy. We have updated versions of Uncle Tom's. Okay, a lot of people don't realize that.
And we stole that.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, a lot of a lot of people don't see it as such, but I mean when you look at it.
Wait, Charles,
Yes.
wait. See, because we deal with generations, we're listening. Menstrual.
Yes.
You gotta, what do you mean by that?
In the 1830s, you had minstrelsy take root, where it was white men who would darken their face and imitate what their idea of what black people were all about. And this became the most popular form of entertainment on the face of the earth. And as black characters, they would discuss the different things that were going on. They would discuss politics and whatnot.
Wait a minute, look. We don't have the visual here. You see two white men made up with black grease paint on their face.
Like around their mouth would be white, whatever they put on to make it look like white lips. And they would be talking as though they was in a kitchen with their wife on the train on the street corner. And you can imagine what that sounded like with them imitating black people in a condescending way.
Minstrelsy was so popular, and then take that to the airwaves. Amos and Andy was the most popular radio show.
Their wife was suntan.
They could tell you when Amos and Andy was on radio because the toilets would stop flushing. Okay, and then just to put on like some of the exaggerated dialogue. In fact, the makeup would exaggerate how they would imitate blacks to give them that look of the big protruding lips and whatnot. But you'd have like two white men, guys, and Charles Corral. They started Amos and Andy, right? They stole it from Flournoy Miller, the black man. He sued them, said they stole my act. But there was an old saying, Brother Leroy, that white people made more money imitating black people than real black people could make being black. And nature of this capitalistic society. You know, they say like, I remember a scene from Amos and Andy where he's in court, and the judge says, well, do you deny these allegations? And Kingfish said, not only do I deny the allegations, I deny the alligator. So you know, it was malaprops and all this kind of stuff was something that was funny, but throughout the history of entertainment, white folk have always been entertained by some image of black. Now, when real blacks had to take over because blacking of the face was no longer the thing you could do, you had white directors and writers writing the material and telling black folk how to be black folk. As one writer said, you don't get, when I talk about representation, you don't get the true image of black folk in cinema. You get what one writer, black writer said, you get an imitation of an imitation. Okay, so let's bring it up to date. When I say what you have is neo-minstrelsy, we've gone from the covert, we've gone from the overt. Now we're in a stage of covert. Years ago, they didn't give a darn about how they presented us. They didn't care if we were upset. They didn't care about our fragility. It was always about white fragility. You can't put anything up there that's going to upset white folk. They didn't care about black feelings. The only thing that has changed that, Leroy, that has made it look like we've made some progress is the box office factor. Black folk now matter more than they ever have because they account for a lot of the money that crosses the till, and they represent a large part of the audience. The audience today for movies is more diverse, and because it's more diverse, motion pictures have to be more reflective of that audience, and they have to be more respectful of that audience. But being in a colonized society and attempting to perpetuate the status quo, these guys who make these motion pictures, for the most part, the industry is run by people who don't know anything about black folk and don't care damn about black folk. And that's a fact. All you have to do is look up the memos that were picked up when they had this break-in. I don't know if you remember those memos that were picked up, and they were reading the memos of white people behind these productions, and one of the memos was talking about how with Equalizer, you take Equalizer with Denzel Washington, how one of the white executives said, we could have made more money if we didn't have a black man like Denzel Washington in the lead.
Talking about a different movie than The Equalizer.
Not The Equalizer.
Wait a minute.
First one.
He said. What did the memo say? I'm missing.
The memo said that had we had a different actor, a white actor, Equalizer would have made more money. Okay. And one of the letters said that Kevin Hart was like a hoa, making anything and everything.
Wow.
Okay. And just to show you, the money they spent on Equalizer 1 was not the same budget they did for Equalizer 2. They only spent $62 million for Equalizer 2. That shows you the trepidation they had from the first time they did the film. But the thing is, the point I want to make is that you know how they went after Hillary, they said give me Hillary's tapes and stuff like that. When they had this break-in, they found these memos, and that's a part of the record where you hear how these people really think, how they really feel. And for the longest, they've always felt they've always told black people who've come to them to pitch a movie, well, your movie won't sell. Black movies don't sell overseas. If we're going to make the movie, we got to have a white character put in it. Therefore, you get, let's say, a film like 42. You remember 42?
Jackie Robinson?
Yes. So, these are what I call my boats. Boats, B-O-A-T-S, based on a true story. We get a lot of what they call biopics. If they're going to make a movie, they have to have the white man in it. When they did Miles Davis' story, that was a mess. They had this white guy. Where he come from, who knows?
He was no good.
When they did Race about Jesse Owens, it was part about Jesse Owens, the other part about his coach. Okay? Jackie Robinson, you're not going to get the Jackie Robinson story unless you get the Brass Rickey story. Okay? So the images of blacks has always been what I call circumscribed. We can't get the true representation of us, but they'll give us instead a representation of who they want us to be and who they think we are. Because for the most part, the people who are gatekeepers, the people controlling the images, are people who don't care about us, don't even want us on that screen. But if they have to put us up there, it has to be done under their conditions, under their rules, because they control the game.
Okay, now that's the background, bringing it up to date. What are some of the films, what are some of the TV shows, what are some of the cartoons that are on that we should be aware of as far as imagery is concerned, that we might just overlook as plain entertainment, but other messages are being conveyed through these films, TV shows, etc.?
Now, which is a beautiful thing, Brother Leroy, the fact that we're in what I call a post-Black Panther era. And the hope is that it's a movement, not a moment. If you look at the money that Black Panther made, it just shattered every expectation. It's made over $1 billion, made over $700 million in the U.S. And everyone's been Wakanda crazy, and there's so much. There was a lot of positive things about the film, and that's what people can relate to: the imagery, the atypical imagery of Africa in a glorious, beautiful way. Black women, strong black women, and black women who were beautiful because of their blackness. They didn't have the. I don't want to put anyone down if they wear their hair certain, but with the short coif, Afro-centric look, that was depicted as beautiful. So that's what really overwhelmed the Black audience. That's what they really loved. And the point I'm trying to get to is the fact that this film had such a positive impact on the audience, that you take a film that came out recently, Superfly, and people from the get-go rejected that, saying, "Oh no, I'm not going to let them take us back." Okay, and so a lot of people would not even go see it. They saw it as something on a conspiracy level of, oh, now Hollywood's trying to take us back. They're trying to take us to the stuff that was out there before Black Panther. We want more Black Panther. We don't want Superfly, that kind of crap. Okay, so that impacted greatly on Superfly. But to answer your question, on the negative side, I feel Superfly, the reason why I got the green light is because someone said, well, I think we could sell Superfly because two of the most popular shows with black folk on cable or TV is cable. You have Power, and on Fox TV you have Empire, and we love those kind of shows. It's like a guilty pleasure, but the imagery is very dark and very negative, and we have black protagonists who are killers, who are drug dealers. And this is something that we have to make sure our young kids don't see this imagery and find that this is something that, with kids being impressionable and not having what I call that adult discount, we don't want them to see this as being something that they would be inspired by and aspire to be like. And that's what's on the negative side. On the positive side, you have some black superheroes. You have Luke Cage on Netflix. That's a superhero, very popular. I don't know if you're familiar with Luke Cage. And then you also have a show, I first heard about it from my brother. He said, have you seen a show called Black Lightning on the CW network? And I said, no, I'm not familiar with it. I caught one episode, and I was very impressed. The creators, and that's what's important. Who's helping to create these shows? If it's people like us doing the creative part, then there's more of a chance for the authenticity to come through. You follow what I'm saying?
Okay.
And so with Black Lightning, you have a black man who's a devoted and caring father. He has a daughter who also has her own superpowers, but he's a school principal. And in the episodes, there are issues surrounding black folk that black people are dealing with now. You know, the police brutality or the police aggressiveness towards people of color. You have those kind of scenes. Blackish.
Mm-hmm.
There's another show that the creator of that show is a dynamic writer, and they're dealing with some issues. Some of the things they wanted to put on, they had to hold back because it was so controversial. But that's another show that is worth watching, and it's something that's relevant and resonates with what's going on in the world in our world today, the zeitgeist of what we're dealing with today.
All right, so the table is open for questions and comments. We have Sister Jenkins, we have Brother Stu, we have Sister Esther Hyatt, and we also have Sister Reverend over there in the corner. She was dozing, but she woke up when you said something about Luke Cage or something like that. Black Lightning. She said, all right. She said, that's my kind of show. So, questions, statements for Brother Charles Woods. He's the expert. He is the expert on black movies. And just before you do that, just a yay or nay, Gary Null wrote a book on black movies, and who helped him?
A guy named Charles Woods.
I just want to put that out there on record, so when Gary Null hears it, he'll say, yes, he did. Esther.
Okay, I have a comment. I don't know if those of us at the table saw Marshall, the film about Thurgood Marshall.
You brought that up.
Did you bring that up?
No, he did.
Oh,
No, I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it was so blatant, the fact that here's a movie about this great man, Thurgood Marshall, and the what's the word for it? The protagonist, or maybe not
protagonist?
that. Or the one who was the hero, simple word. The hero of that was this little chubby white man who had some issues with his own problems, having to do with religion and fear and so forth. It was amazing. I mean,
That fits. What's that point that you were making earlier, Charles?
This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Marshall was a film that was not seen by many people. It's a story. If we're talking about superheroes, we're talking about mythical, fantastical people. But how about the real life people we had who were superheroes? I remember when I saw that film, I saw a special screening. I was there with the star. And one gentleman, after the film ended, he said, you know what, this is the kind of men and women our kids need to see. Real life people.
Yeah.
Thurgood Marshall, who became the first black
Supreme
Court justice. You know, what I say? I say we went from Thurgood Marshall to No Good Thomas. But okay, here's the thing. I spoke about the fact that when they do these films, in order to sell it, they got to bring in what I call the dilution solution. They got to put in the milk with the coffee.
Yeah.
So what they did is they had this Jewish man who had to try the case, because this was based on a true story. This actually happened. They would not let Thurgood Marshall represent the black client. He could not do it. So here's a story. They said, well, we can tell this story because it's true, but it fits in with how we feel we can sell a movie with a white man as being part of the movie. You follow what I'm saying?
Then Panther falls into the same category.
Yeah.
The CIA agent. Okay. The CIA, what I call CIA, Brother Leroy, and your listening audience, I call it the Caucasian in Alliance. CIA, Caucasian and Alliance. What they did with Black Panther, for the most part, it was a ghettoized film. When I say ghettoized, I mean there were very few scenes outside of Africa. The film, for the most part, is set in Africa, and it's basically all black, but they brought in, you had two vivid white characters. You had the bad white guy who was working with Killmonger, and then you had the CIA agent. He's someone who would be used in the end to help bring Wakanda to the attention of the world. And he's also, in small part, a way they can say, well, this film isn't all black. But the reason why they ghettoize it, why I say they ghettoize it, is because what happens is this. When you have black protagonists, when you have black heroes, I pointed this out when I did the Slap Heard Across the World, around the world with Sidney Poitier. For years, when we grew up on movies, and a lot of the old timers like me would know this, when we saw movies, they could spit on black folk, kill black folk, do everything to black folk, but the black man was not allowed to hit a white man in the movie. Couldn't fight back. Okay? If they made Black Panther, if you look at Black Panther, the negative part of Black Panther is that when they start all their killing, who are they killing? They're killing black folks.
Black folks, right.
Even the thing that was regrettable, and a lot of people don't want to say this or recognize it, but even the black women, wasn't the black woman had to go against her lover? And that's fighting each other?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And as smart as Wakanda was supposed to be and dignified, at the drop of a dime, this guy who came out of nowhere, Killmonger, who says, I'm in charge now, everybody was ready to follow the leader. Now that's a message I don't want my kids to get. Because I'm not going to follow no leader just because he's a leader without questioning what he wants me to fight for.
Very good. Very good. Anyway, I saw something on the internet today, and it's interesting. But let's deal with something you brought up that I have seen for the very first time based on this interview, and that's Birth of a Nation, 1915, 1914. That was the period called the Red Summer with the lynchings. So the Birth of a Nation viewing coincided with the massive lynchings that began to go on in America at that time. Am I right or wrong in that? I think it was the 14, they call it the Red Summer, that whole period of time, not just 1 year, but several.
They had lynching that went unabated. They made all attempts to get lynching stopped, to have it looked into. The government would not look into it. Birth of a Nation, the President Woodrow Wilson, when that film came out, he said it was like writing history with a sword. He had his own book on history, but the thing is, when you watch what they call the intertitles, when the blacks are first shown, the intertitle says, the import of the black slaves, the beginning of the downfall of America. Words to that effect.
Who said that? Give me that again.
That's in Birth of a Nation. You go to Birth of a Nation.
Go ahead.
Okay, when they were bringing the black slaves in, it said that the entry of the black man into America, the seeds of destruction, this was the first sign of the seeds of destruction for America. Okay? And the whole thing with the Birth of a Nation was that it was glorifying vigilantism, terrorism. You know, we always hear about how people are upset about the terrorists, and they paint certain people as terrorists. And the most terroristic people on the face of the earth have been the American white man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that history you don't get in cinema. Whenever they want to present films about black folk, and whenever they want to show the atrocities black folk have had to face, they don't want to deal with it in real time. They'll go back to slavery time, and they say, look how it used to be. So we get all these movies, The Help, 12 Years a Slave. What I call, they'll deal with us either from a historical distance or a geographical distance, where if they want to show the atrocities and the brutalities blacks have had to face because of white racism, they won't show it happening here, but we get all these movies where it takes place in South Africa. Okay? And for the longest, we didn't want to have the American government would not divest from South Africa, and then South Africa had to say, you know, you guys have a nerve, the audacity to tell us how we're mistreating blacks when we learned about apartheid from America.
How would you, as we reach our concluding members, Sister F, you have a question?
Yes. A moment ago you mentioned the thoughts of this nation when black people started being brought here from Africa, kidnapped. And you mentioned the seeds of destruction. This became, when the black man came to this area, they called him, that this is the beginning of the seeds of destruction for America. You remember saying that? I remember you just saying.
That's how the birth of a nation, right?
Yes.
Okay.
When it comes on, they have the intertitle.
Right. And it made, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we're talking about visuals and images and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And the sad thing about it is that technology is not being used the way it should be used. Mm-hmm. When I had to do my research, I had to go to the library. I had to buy thousands of books. Now I can just sit right down in the comfort of my home and have access to all kinds of different things. I can go and access old newspapers and things like that. You go on the train, you go on the bus, everyone's got their head down looking to their phones.
Yeah.
The question is, what are they looking at? You know, what are they learning? Because if we can get a man like Trump in office, this country can't be very learned. It can't be very well educated. If we can't get the things we need, you see, there's a saying, you get the government you deserve. All right? You get the leadership you deserve. I would say anyone raising a kid today, make sure you monitor what they watch. When I grew up, my mom was in there watching TV with me, and she was saying, when kids have questions. That's the natural thing about, as a kid, you don't know anything. You know, this whole thing about why is the sky blue? You're naturally curious as a kid. But today, kids are watching things and they go unmonitored because television, technology, all of this has become a babysitter. It has become surrogate parents. It has become distractions. It has become a way of having kids out of your ear, or the parents here, or whoever's raising the kids, so that they can do something else. They're not monitoring what the kids are watching, and that's dangerous. You can go on the internet and look up what images are doing to our kids. Black kids, especially black boys, have the lowest self-esteem from watching TV than anyone else, and our kids watch 10 hours more TV than any other kid.
When Sister Reverend, did you want to ask any questions, make any comments?
I totally agree. I'm Pastor Glover. How are you? Hello, I'm Pastor Glover. How are you?
Okay, fine. Thank you, sister.
I totally agree. Um, Even in the schools, our children have low self-esteem because they don't know who they are. They're not learning anything about them. And the TV, we are allowing them to watch TV the way they are watching TV. TV is manipulating our children. TV is teaching our children to kill each other.
Yes.
The games that they're playing. So, you know, we were manipulated. So now we are passing on to our children what was passed on to us. Like you said early on, um, back in my time, I was born in '65, and my idols were the white people. You know, I wanted the blonde hair, I wanted the long hair, I wanted the baby that looked white with blue eyes. I wanted that too because those were my heroes growing up. So, you know, and I passed that on to my children.
Mhm. And sometimes you don't even realize it.
Right.
You don't even realize it, but it's the media. These mediated images, they can manipulate you, like you say, and people are not even aware of it. We'll watch something like Black Panther, and we're jumping for joy, and then, you know, it's like I told Brother Leroy earlier, I look at it as like filter cigarette. You know, they put a filter on it, so what's that supposed to do? Make the cigarette better? It's still going to kill you,
Right.
you know? I remember Dick Gregory, he said he used to have a commercial for a Marlboro cigarette, and the guy is riding, and he's a heroic guy, and he's telling him, smoke Marlboro, be a man, and you know, he had this image of this, because he's smoking Marlboro, he's got this great image. And Dick Gregory said, I got a commercial. I don't have this guy riding on the horse. And he's riding into a cemetery, and he's saying, this is Marlboro country.
Now listen, as we conclude, that's strictly Dick Gregory, brother. As I would ask Dick, I said, where you get this stuff from? It'd be coming right off the top of his head.
Yeah.
Movies that you would recommend, and I'm going to include my two, The Great Debaters and Night John.
Night John, okay, that's what Carl Lumley.
I don't.
He's raising the daughters. He's raising the daughters in that one.
That's Night John is the slave girl trying to learn how to read.
And that's with Carl Lumley, though. That's the star. I'm quite sure, but yeah. But the thing is, you said Great Debaters. I was going to mention that, Brother Leroy. Not many people went to see that. That's about Melvin V. Tolson, 1935. He, in Wiley College, Marshall, Texas, 1935, one of the last bastions of hard-nosed racism. He formed a debate team, and they went on to challenge Harvard. Aquila and the Bee.
Yes.
Okay? Inspirational, aspirationals. Let our kids see stories of kids that if they put their nose to the grind, they can get something done. They can learn something, but they have to put in the work. Okay? Queen of Cotway. I love that movie. No one went to see it. Beautiful movie about a chess prodigy from Uganda, and she was someone who came from the poorest of countries, the poorest of neighborhoods, and was able to succeed. Hold just a second. On the phone. Talk to you later. I love Django Unchained. I think if a black man put that movie out, it wouldn't have been released. Okay? I'll tell you what, one film, The Magnificent Seven, with Denzel Washington. The reason why I loved it, because he, you know, we use the term HNIC. He was the HNIC. But when I grew up, the media told me there were no such things as a black Western hero. When Sammy Davis Jr. first appeared on the Rifleman, you had white folks writing and said, where the heck did you get the idea that a black man was a cowboy? But Magnificent Seven, I love that. But I tell you, just as I spoke to you earlier, I saw Equalizer 2, and Denzel is a superhero. He's now a bona fide superhero, and Equalizer 2 did something unique to the first one. There's a beautiful relationship he has with the young man who played in the film Moonlight. And it's a powerful scene, and it was good to see Denzel's character get involved with some black folk. Because for the most part, what they do is, as I say, you have what they call these magic Negroes, these exceptional black roles, these characters, where the only blacks you see are them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and their mission is transforming and saving white folk, and they're not involved with black. Here's the other thing: your black women in the audience, ask them where's the black woman in these movies. And if they see a black woman, she's not black. I don't have anything against white, light-skinned black women. We have diverse colors in our race, but the thing is, all of the women got to be light, or they got to be white. They make all these movies with black actors and white women. Loving, that was a story they put out, based on a true story. The Mountain Between Us with Idris Elba.
Yeah.
Okay? So the thing is, what they're doing is they're selling us a message, and if you don't know what the message is, then what's going to happen is you're going to be walking around and you're going to be wondering why you hate people who look like you and you love people who don't.
Brother Charles Woods, any further questions or comments? Brother Stu?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
He said it all. It's beautiful.
You said it all. Back in the day, we would go to the theater, and they would show three or five cowboy westerns and 10 cartoons, and that was covered it all, and that's what you did today. And that's
I remember the westerns, as much as I love them, but don't forget the symbolism of the western. Who wore the white? Who rode the white horse and had the white hat?
Whit Wilson.
all the good white cowboys wore white. They rode on the white horse and they were in white. When we saw Lash LaRue or someone in black, Hopalong Cafe here at black, we said, oh man, that's a refreshing change.
Yeah.
But the symbolism was always there. The symbolism is there.
Man.
My brother. Oh, sister.
Brother, are you in New York? I came in a little late.
Yes.
You're right here in New York. Okay.
Yes.
So
yes.
we can get hold of you again.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
All right,
Then,
my brother.
one last thing.
Oh, yes, sir.
Leroy. For the most part, when you see our movies, there's no black romantic relationships between black people. There's no black man, black woman relationship. We're not seeing those films.
That's right.
One of the most beautiful films I saw, and one of the things that struck me most about the film, other than the fact that it revealed one of our history. You know, for the most part, when they tell our stories, it's about we were athletes, we were athletically unique, but hidden figures. We're not just athletes. We have brains too, and we were vital to the Nassau program. But the thing is, what I loved in that movie was the relationship when that man said, "Hey, I love you, and to get you, I have to take your daughters and kids with you. I don't care." That was a relationship that I wanted to see. And one last thing, when I saw Fences, I'm hearing all the black folks like, oh, Fences. I was very disappointed with Fences because I did not like Denzel's character, how he treated Viola Davis's character. I'm tired of seeing, as one man said, black pathology is big business for America.
Claudine.
Okay. Claudine was a wonderful story. What a lot of people don't know is that the director was on the blacklist when we had the HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. He was on the blacklist, John Berry. And it was a beautiful film. It was one of the first films to be made by black folk who were part of the production.
That was Delta Sigma?
No, Delta helped put out a film that no one sold. Ozzie Davis directed. His name is slipping me, but that's the one that Delta put together this film. Ozzie Davis did the director. That film made no money. It was a big bomb. We're going to try to see if we can get it to release it. It'll come to me. But the thing is, Claudine, that was a company that was one of the first companies to form to have black participation in it, in the production side of it. And Claudine was, what was also beautiful about it was the music of Curtis Mayfield. You know, like one of the songs was "Make Yours a Happy Home" and "To Be Invisible." But it showed, you know, the welfare system, how the welfare system, you know, if they have any system in place, it's not to help us progress, it's just to help us stagnate. and I mean, these things are designed to just keep us the way in control. You know what I'm saying?
Got it. And the concluding statement from you is, what do you want this interview today to do for the audience?
Here's the thing. The audience is very important. You know, part of audience is audio, listen, but, you know, listen and see. If we want good films, we have to be a good audience. We have to be conscious of what we're seeing, critical, and demand better images, respectful images. As I say, you get the government you deserve, you get the movies you deserve. You know, if we keep supporting this garbage and not realize it's garbage, they're going to continue to make garbage for it. We have to learn how to be critical thinkers. One of the things I learned that's very important is to be a lifelong learner. And the key to learning is observation. And what a lot of people don't realize is when you listen to the language tells you, Brother Leroy. We see movies on the screen, and when you put a screen up at your window, what does it do? It keeps some things in and some things out. Okay? And when you see movies in the dark.
Right.
And one thing you want to hope is that after you see the movie, you don't stay in the dark.
Right.
Go ahead, black man. Thank you very much, Brother Charles Woods. At the Wisdom Table here at the Weldon Johnson houses on Lexington Avenue. I want to thank you very much. May God continue to bless you and your family, and you will be black on this scene very, very soon.
So much, Brother Leroy, and peace and blessings to everyone there. And you, the Countdown at Crucini was the film we were talking about. By the Delta, and God bless everyone.
All right. Thank you, brother.